Hi, my final project for decoding nature is called Traces of Wind. This project is an interactive desert-inspired particle system. It's inspired by the desert as a grounding space. For me, personally, the desert is a place where I can slow down, breathe, and let go of negative energy. And I wanted to translate that feeling into a visual system where the user can interact with wind, sand, and movement. The final sketch shows a bright desert scene with a blue sky and a hot sun, heat waves, and some sand particles across the bottom of the canvas. And then the user controls the wind using the mouse. When I move the mouse, the sand reacts to the direction and speed of my movement. So when I move the mouse slowly, the particles shift gently and the movement feels calmer and softer. But when I move the mouse faster, the wind becomes stronger and the sand scatters more. And this makes the interaction clear because the user can immediately see the effect of their movement on the environment. I did not want the user to draw directly on the screen. Instead, I wanted the user to influence a natural force. So the mouse sort of becomes the wind, and the wind shapes the sound, and then the patterns come from many small particles responding to simple rules. The final version also has darker grains in the sand, and these darker particles represent heavier or negative energy. So when the user moves the mouse near them, they scatter and slowly fade away, and this connects back to my personal idea behind the project, which is the desert carrying away what feels heavy. And you can also notice a small calm down bar at the bottom. So when the mouse is still, the calm value increases. When the mouse moves quickly, it decreases. And I added this to show the relationship between movement and stillness. The main interaction is simple, so you move the mouse to shift the sand and press R to reset the darker grains. So technically speaking, I used particles, vectors, velocity, acceleration, forces, and Perlin noise. Each grain of sand is a particle. It has position, velocity, and acceleration. The wind is calculated by comparing the current mouse position to the previous mouse position, and this creates a vector that stores the direction and strength of the mouse movement. Then that wind force is applied to particles near the mouse. Particles that are closer to the mouse are affected more strongly. So while particles further away are affected less. This helped make the movement feel more like wind instead of just dragging the particles around. And then I also used Perlin noise to create softer movement. Without noise, the sound felt too mechanical. The noise adds small changes to the particle, which makes the motion feel more natural or organic. And for the final design, I built this scene in layers. So first I created the blue sky using a gradient, and then I added the bright sun with a glow around it because I wanted the sun to feel hot and intense. And then after that, I added the sand base, dune lines, and then the heat waves and the moving particles. In my documentation, I started with the project overview where I explained the main concepts and why I chose the desert. I also explain how the project connects to grounding and letting go of negative energy. Then I just pasted the sketch of my final project and the final interaction. Then I included the interaction section where I describe how the mouse controls the wind and how the darker grains fade when the user moves through them. I also included a technical section where I explain the use of particles, vectors, and force. After that, I included implementation details with code snippets. These show how I calculated the wind using the mouse movement, and then how I applied the wind to the particles, and how I used noise to make the movement feel more natural. And then I also documented the two prototypes in the final version. The first prototype focused on the visual atmosphere created. I created the blue sky, hot sun, and sand texture at this stage, and I was mostly testing the mood of the project and whether the canvas could already feel like a desert environment. And then the second prototype, I added the main interaction, so the mouse became the wind, and the sand particles started responding to the direction of the speed of the user's movement. This helped me test whether the interaction was clear and intuitive. And then the final version combined the visual atmosphere and the mouse-controlled wind. These then added the emotional layer. I added dark grains that fade when the user moves through them. as well as the com bar at the bottom, this right here. And then this made the project feel more complete because it connected to the technical system, to the personal idea of letting go. Here I'm gonna paste the video. And then in the challenges section, I wrote about how the particles first followed the mouse too directly, and that made the interaction feel more like drawing instead of wind. So to fix this, I made the force depend on the distance, so only nearby particles are affected strongly. Another challenge was making the emotional idea subtle. I didn't want the negative energy concept to be too obvious or dramatic, so I presented it through darker greens that slowly fade into the sound. For the reflection, I wrote that I think the project successfully connects technical ideas with with a personal idea. Sorry, the interaction is simple, but it fits the concept because the user can immediately understand it and see the result. If I developed this further, I would add sound, maybe soft wind or desert ambience. I would also like to try webcam interaction where the user's hand movement controls the wind instead of the mouse. Another future improvement would be making the doom patterns build up more clearly over time so the user leaves a strong trace in the landscape. Finally, I included my references. Oh no, I have not actually. And AI disclosure. I used the p5.js reference class examples and desert landscape as inspiration. I also disclosed that I used AI to brainstorm, organize the documentation and debug parts of the code and help achieve certain visual effects, especially with like the glow of the sun, how I could visually communicate heat waves. And yeah, the final concept, interaction choices, and edits were based on my testing and personal connection to the desert. And yeah, that's all.